William, thanks for stopping by. And it's the subtitle is A Revolutionary New Look at the Universe and Life. So tell me, specifically enough why, William, you wrote the book, and then we're going to get right into the questions.
Sure, and thank you for having me today,
You're
Neil.
welcome.
I wrote the book because of, in a word, discovery. Um, the universe as we see it or as we know it scientifically, you could say has a hole in the bottom of it. And I was looking at this, when you look at atomic physics, there's a lot of things that are completely inexplicable that go on at a particle level. And so being a curious soul, I was looking into it. And after looking at it for maybe about 10 years, I realized there was an answer that was better than the answer we had now. So essentially, the book represents a proposal for a paradigm shift in terms of how we view ourselves and how we view the universe. It's a little bit like the paradigm shift which might have occurred, say, in the 1500s, where people went from viewing the Earth as being the center of the universe with the sun and the moon and Mars and all that going around it, which, I mean, if you go outside and look, it looks like the sun goes overhead. But in actuality, that didn't match up with the observations really, really well. So someone came up with a new paradigm, which is, let's make the sun the center of the solar system and have the Earth and Mars and all these things go around it. Those observations matched up much better and put us in a position where now we can send probes to Mars and the moon and land them within meters of where we're aiming.
Yeah,
So
you're
that was
ready
a
for
better
are
model.
you ready for space travel at one point in your life?
I think I'm a little bit past that point in my life at this point, Neil.
They're talking about space development, where we're going to go. That's an interesting thing to go in deeper in another time in another place because we're closer than people think, for sure. That's
True,
for
but
sure.
I'm probably a little bit closer to the end of my life than the beginning.
Okay. What is the mind body problem?
The mind body problem is a problem that philosophers have been wrestling with for centuries. The idea comes from back in the 16th century. There was a philosopher who postulated that there was a physical body, a physical universe, which was created, and a mind which could observe and know about it and make decisions. And this was based on the idea, the fellow's name was Rene Descartes. And he was looking at religion, he was looking at the science of his time and trying to find something which was an idea that somebody else couldn't say, no, that's not true. And so the one thing he found that nobody could speak against was the idea that if I'm thinking, there must be somebody or something doing some thinking. And so he postulated a non-physical entity which was doing the thinking. It could know and decide and observe. The trouble was, if you have a non-physical mind, how does it affect a physical body? And he couldn't resolve that problem. And philosophers since that time, since the 1600s, have not really been able to resolve that problem. I think perhaps I've put a bow on it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, the mind and the body, how much I mean, to think about the mind and the universe and how powerful each one of them are in so many aspects. And without how our mind has a lot more power than we think.
Yes, indeed. It has way more power than we think. I talked earlier about a paradigm shift. The paradigm shift that I'm looking at is going from the current materialistic scientific idea that there's a universe out there. We grew up within it. We're essentially educated monkeys, according to a quote from Stephen Hawking, and we're observing it and making decisions about it. Going from that model to a model where consciousness is us. We each are an individual manifestation of consciousness. And this consciousness is what causes the universe to actually come into being. So that puts us at the center of the universe as opposed to the universe being at the center of us.
Very, very interesting. And I have a little bit of experience of this conversation, so it's going to be really interesting where we're going and diving with William Truax today about his book Reality 2.0. So, in your definition, what is consciousness?
Consciousness is you, it's me. Essentially, what I've done is I've taken Rene Descartes' idea of a thinking mind and gone one step further with it and assigned to it not only the abilities to think and to know and to observe, but also the abilities to create and to impel. And as a result, you have a mind that causes things. And if you look at the experiments of atomic physics, from a century ago, which were very, very confusing and still are very confusing in many ways. One of the things that was really a difference maker was the fact that scientists were finally able to separate out one particle from all the masses of all the things that are around us. Like, for example, this bottle of water, let's say it has 35 quadrillion atoms in it.
Right.
And each atom has maybe 100 pieces, subatomic particles. So they were able to separate one out, which is something they'd never been able to do before, and take a look at it. And when they looked at just one of those particles at a time, what they noticed is that the particle didn't come into existence until they either looked at it or for it, or it interacted with some other particle that someone was looking at or for. And that is probably the single biggest fact that makes quantum reality, if you want to call it that, weird. And it becomes very, very difficult for our current scientific models to deal with.
Okay. Very, very interesting as we'll go deeper. What is life versus stuff in the context of your book?
Life is essentially that force. Let me go back a step. The way I look at reality is there is a non-physical side to it and a physical side. And they work together to produce the reality that we see, we know, and that we operate in. And so non-physical reality is consciousness. It's very difficult for sometimes for people to get an idea of what non-physical reality might be, but you take a look at, well, what's love? What's beauty? What's an idea? Are these physical things? Are they composed of particles? Do they have a specific point in space where they exist? No, they're non-physical. And then, of course, you have physical reality, like the water bottle I showed you earlier.
Right.
If you take the two of these and you put them together, the non-physical reality is what I call life, or to use a fancy Latin word, essentia. It's that which is essential because it's what brings the physical reality into being. And then on the other hand, I have stuff, which is the physical reality itself. So the non-physical reality brings the physical reality into existence, and at that point, you have a complete pie, if you will.
Right. Quite interesting to think about in so many ways between life and stuff. And
if I may comment, it goes beyond merely being an interesting idea. I mean, if you take a look at the history of religion and philosophy for the past 5,000 years, lots of people have had interesting ideas. What this is taking the data from atomic physics, taking some advanced mathematics, although I don't go into it in the book, and essentially coming up, and also the laws of reason and logic, and saying, what is the most logical answer for the phenomena that we're seeing with these experiments? And this is the most logical answer.
Okay. All right. So how does spiritualism fill in what science is missing?
Well, I don't necessarily like to use the word spiritualism a whole lot because it makes people think of seances and calling back the dead. It's not, how do I say, if you go back almost to the history of the beginning of time, man has viewed himself as being a spiritual being. It's only in the last couple of centuries that we've gotten away from that. And so, what was your question again? I'm sorry, I lost track of it.
That's okay, no problem. So I was basically saying, how does spiritualism fill in what science is missing?
Well, the way science is done these days is it's very materialistic. Essentially, the model is that there was an organic soup, and somehow amino acids coalesce out of this, which formed up into cells, which formed up into slime, which formed up into plants, which formed up into animals. And there's lots of lucky breaks that occurred along the ways. And eventually, somehow, consciousness emerged from this. And science is actually really, really good because what it did is it took the history of man's knowledge and it subjected it to a certain rigor. It's like, how do we actually know something is true? How do we think rationally with things? So those benefits are very, very cool. But what I'm doing is taking the benefits of how to think and how to know that we learned from science and apply it to things that actually take a step beyond mere physical reality. The problem you run into, and this is something I discuss in the book, is that if you have a system in which the only data you accept is physical data, the only things you can really know about are physical things. It's a little bit like looking at black and white photos and saying, well, what do we know about the color red? Can we prove the color red exists by looking at black and white photos? No. But also, you can't prove the color red doesn't exist by looking at black and white photos. And essentially, the sciences that we have today are looking at black and white photos. They're not looking at the greater reality, which actually creates them.
Okay. Very, very. I'm understanding where you're going, and I think based on some of these other questions, we'll go more. So you think that spiritualism is just not defined well in a lot of ways in science?
Um, any system has rules. And this is one of the things I go into the book. And there's actually a mathematical proof for this. Any system has to have rules, and the rules exist outside that system. Very much like if you look at a football game, you have the guys in the red jerseys, the guys in the white jerseys, and then the guys with the zebra stripes. They're not part of the game. The rules exist outside of the game. And it's a similar thing with this universe, for example. The rules for this universe exist in some way transcendent to or outside or beyond this universe. They can't be proven by any of the phenomena that occur within the universe. So we're looking at a system which is defined essentially by things which are not within it. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, definitely
Okay.
does. Because I think that spiritualism we can't see. We
Well,
can't. We can
I, I,
feel, but we can't see. What are your
I,
thoughts?
like I said, I don't like the word spiritualism so well, but spirituality, perhaps.
Yeah.
Another word that was used for it was metaphysics. And it's kind of
Oh,
funny because most people, when you say the word metaphysics, they think of weird, gushy stuff. But metaphysics, all it means is that which essentially determines the bounds or the rules of physics. And so when you're looking at the rules of physics, the rules of science, or the rules of this particular universe, you're looking at metaphysics. And what we've done here is try to propose a framework in which you can reliably operate in a metaphysical way.
okay. What is the Essentia theory? Is that correct?
Essentia, it's the same
Essentia.
root, it's
Yeah.
the same root word as essential.
Essentia theory. Yeah.
Yeah. And basically, it's just the idea that you and I and all living things are each individual manifestations of consciousness, of life force, of that which makes the difference between a pile of protoplasm and a living cell. So,
Okay.
essentia is what makes the universe go, and the universe is what's going.
Is that by our minds the universe goes?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's by our minds. The way this particular model works out, um, the spirit, if you will, or the soul, or the elan vital, if you want to use a term from early 20th century philosophy, it's the animating force. And so, the way I look at things, you are a manifestation of that animating force. You are a life force, a spirit, if you will, but you have a mind and you have a body. So I think it was the Police who originally wrote their lyric, "We are all spirits in the material world." Well, we're spirits who use minds to operate in the material world.
Okay. So, how does your model differ from our current understanding of the universe?
Our current understanding of the universe is essentially a physical universe first model. Essentially, it says the physical universe has always been there, it will always be there. Life that arose on Earth that did so by a long string of lucky chances. And we have attained consciousness through this string of lucky chances. And ultimately, what we do is we live in that universe and we look at it and we know things about it. And it's very interesting from a philosophical point of view what that means, because it means that, well, the universe is really, really huge, and I'm really, really small. The universe has existed for 13.8 billion years, give or take. I exist for 70 or 80. Nothing that I do really makes that much of a difference. I think Shakespeare once said something to the effect of, "Life's but a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon a stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot full of sound and fury, signifying nothing." Pardon me, Shakespeare, if I've misquoted you, but it's something to that effect. Um, that particular model doesn't leave room for the importance of human life. It makes human life essentially peripheral or on the outside or to the side of the more important physical reality. This particular model says that human life is what actually brings the material into being, and therefore it is itself central to the physical experience. So it means that the choices we make matter. It means that our lives matter. It means that things go the way ultimately that we choose that they go. Now, granted, there are many, many, many of us, and we all make different decisions. It's a little bit like being in a big football stadium where everyone's yelling and cheering. One voice may or may not make that much difference, but if you can change minds and you can start changing the viewpoint of all those voices, then they'll start cheering for the other team or maybe cheering for different things, and you can change the reality of what people see and hear.
And that's so true. So you think without the current understanding of the universe is it's going to be here, it doesn't matter who's on the universe will continue to thrive versus the people in the universe makes things different than just
Well, I don't know if, again, since the people who are here are what bring the universe into existence. Um, let me digress for a second. It's a little bit like that question. If a tree falls in the forest and there's no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? And the answer is yes. The particles of which that forest and those trees are composed do exist. They have reality. They are real. They are there. And if there's no one there to hear them right at that moment, the tree still falls. It still creates sound waves. It still makes noise. However, if you take all the living beings that exist in this universe and put them on a bus and move them out someplace,
okay.
um, how long would this universe continue to exist? Well, essentially, the particles of which the universe are composed exist as long as either something is looking at them or they are interacting with some other particle that has been looked at. So essentially, if you took all the beings and moved them out on a bus, this universe would percolate along for a while, maybe quite a long while, but eventually it would wind down because there's no one there to actually bring it into being continuously and newly. And so it would eventually wind down and wink out of existence.
This is fascinating because you're saying, what if, let's say, human beings did not exist? Okay, but there were animals and other species
Mhm.
on Earth. Would the universe exist?
Well, I'm not so anthrocentric, if you will, or anthropocentric, perhaps is the word. I'm not so man-centric as to believe that human beings are the only form of life. Again, the whole idea of that which animates means anything which gives life. And so you're going to have higher forms of life and lower forms of life. Human beings are a fairly high form of life. Whether or not they're the highest, I'm not certain. I can't say. I know there are certainly lower forms of life. And so, as long as life continues to exist, as long as there is an animating principle existing in this universe, the universe will continue to exist.
Very fascinating because, but let's say there's no life at all, then the universe would not exist.
It wouldn't suddenly just blink out of existence because the particles, if they continue to interact, they continue to be real. But eventually, it's a little bit like watching a traffic jam slowly dissipate after 7 o'clock at night. You have a whole bunch of stuff at 5 o'clock and 5:30 and 6 o'clock, and gradually some people get off the interstate, more people get off the interstate, and eventually the interstate clears up. And it would be a little bit like that, where the flow would continue for quite some time, but eventually that which creates the particles and brings them into existence, if it's not there, there's nothing further being brought into existence, and eventually it all winds down.
Winds down quickly, right?
If
That's
you want to press me for an estimate, and this is purely just a guesstimate on my part,
yeah.
I'd say it would probably wind down over the course of about 500 million years.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
it's not going to go away
It'd be a
tomorrow.
while, bit of while for sure. Yeah.
It would be a while.
So, how do you present complex ideas to make them accessible to the average reader?
Well, if I'm right about this, or if these ideas have any validity at all, they augur, or they bring about, or would tend to bring about, a change in our culture, our civilizations. And I think it would be a very positive change. And as a result, I felt a responsibility when writing to make sure that the ideas I'm putting forth are understandable by as broad an audience as possible. I know that philosophers and scientists like to use big words and they like to sound really important, but it's not really necessary to use big words or math or highfalutin concepts, if you will, to get an idea across. So I've tried to write in a way that's, and just like this interview, I'm trying to speak in a way that's accessible to a person of average intelligence, average literacy. I want people to be able to read this and get an idea of what's going on, as opposed to writing a book merely for the elite.
I got it. Totally, I understand. So basically, how does knowing basic principles about people and their relationship to the universe change our approach to economics?
You know, economics is an interesting subject because a lot of knowledge has been developed in that area, but no one's ever really come up with the basic purpose of economics. Why do we have economics? And if you ask somebody, why do we do economics? It's like, well, the person with the most toys wins. It's a way of keeping score in a sense. It's a way perhaps of achieving some comfort. But no one's really delineated the basic purpose that underlies economics. And part of what I've written is that the essence of economics is essentially, I do something good for you, you do something good for me. It's an interaction on a personal level. It's not a material sort of thing. And so knowing that, we know that, okay, my purpose in life from an economic point of view is to create good things. Your purpose in life from an economic point of view is to create good things that others want, so much so that they're saying, hey, I'll give you some stuff in exchange for the good things that you've
Right.
made for me. And that's really the basics of economics. And then you can build a whole very complex, very mathematical structure from there. But you need to have the basic that each one of us needs to be creating something of some value to somebody else.
And that has to do with the principles then. That if
Yes.
you're not creating something of value for someone else, the train will slow down at one point and you will not be able to continue to get sales or to grow.
Well, yeah, the train will slow down. As I think, as Margaret Thatcher once said, the problem with socialism is you eventually run out of other people's money. Or to put it another way, the problem with, shall I say, a materialist viewpoint of economics, if you have that kind of a viewpoint, your viewpoint is like, how can I get as much stuff for as little effort as possible? And that's really, really cool for you. It's not very cool for the overall system because you're not putting into the pot, you're just taking out of the pot. And so after a while, the pot empties out. And that's
Mm.
what you see happening in the US right at the moment, in Europe as well. You see more people taking out of the pot than putting in. And so there is overall less wealth, less prosperity, et cetera. You can't build a society on the back of people who don't really build anything.
Totally.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean, that is the dream of some in
Mm.
some way, that, we'll have AI and it'll create everything for us. But then the question becomes, okay, great. So if you have AI who provides all your needs, it provides housing and food and clothing and everything else you could possibly need, great. What about you? What's the meaning of your life? And that's
Yeah.
one of the chapters in the book, is what is the meaning of life?
And that meaning of life is key
Yeah.
because the fact is, let's say if they're talking about universal income for all that are replaced by AI in the next, I don't know how many years. They're conspiracy theorists say 10, some say 2, some say whatever, and you're seeing a percentage of people that are not working hard replaced very easily by AI. My thought process is if you just pay people to stay home, it's going to cripple the economy because they're going to spend it on the wrong things. It's not going to be on goods and services. It's going to be on things that are going to drug them to feel like they have a meaningless life. And if you don't have a meaningful life, you are not going to be a great productive member of society.
Well, yeah. If you don't have a meaningful life, not only are you not going to be productive, you're not going to be a useful member of society. You take a look at the social statistics. in terms of like how many people are unhappy, how many people have mental health problems, how many people are killing themselves.
Right.
I mean, if you take a look at that one simple datum by itself, why would a living being kill himself or herself?
Because they disdain life.
Because their life has no meaning.
No meaning. Yep.
It has no meaning. And so, again, what the purpose of this book is, to some degree, is looking at science. The science is very interesting, but at the end of the day, the science is not central to what I'm trying to do. The important point is what the science points us to, what it means. And it means that your life is important. My life is important. And we need to do things that validate our lives, that make us better, that make us stronger, that make us grow as individual beings. And we do that not by sitting around watching porn and jerking off, but by doing something useful for our neighbors, doing something useful for ourselves, creating something of some value for the civilization.
All right. What concepts will readers be able to implement into their daily lives?
Essentially, just be aware of the fact that your life has meaning. The actions you take are important. You don't exist in a bubble. You don't exist by yourself. The things you do have effects that redound throughout the environment and throughout the society. The society is made up of all of us, and so it's only as good as all of us. So if we each ratchet up the purpose and the meaning of our lives, and this book will give you some idea about how to do that, then the society becomes saner. It becomes an easier place to live, a better place to live. If you take a look at it from a social point of view, you say, oh, well, the crime stats go down and the anxiety stats go down, that sort of thing. These are all very, very important. Essentially, it makes the world a better place, a happier place, a more meaningful place.
I think it's fantastic and very deep to really dive deeper into this understanding. Do you have other books in the works?
I do. I have one on economics, one on what I call vitality, which is essentially kind of like health, but it has to do with being full of health as opposed to merely being, I feel okay. And then the third one is about civilization itself, or civics, or how you would run and administer a civilization. And it includes such topics as government, ethics, that sort of thing. To me, what this trip through science revealed was really more important than just resolving the questions of science, which are outstanding, they're big questions. But it goes deeper than that, and more important than that, it goes to the actual foundation of the universe.
Okay. All right. People can check you out where? Where's the best place?
So I have a website. The website is reality20book.com. There's a free sample on the website if you don't want to get the book itself. There's also a link to Amazon. The book is available on Amazon as both Kindle and in paperback.
Fascinating conversation, William. Makes me think further to understand specifically enough. And you're going to have the science that backs that up of why a society, and I see that you're leading people to the economic side of things and what makes a great civilization. And without a great civilization, there's not going to be anyone in the universe. Without the universe, we're going to die. So that's pretty much the universe is going to die. So all those connectivities, understanding the power that we're as important, the collective, not just the physical things we see in front of us.
Yes,
That's
indeed.
very good.
Yeah,
Thank you,
your
William.
life is important.
Yes, exactly.